Hi, everybody. I'm Clive Watkins. I'm the disheveled director of advancement. And I'm here with Beth and Leah this morning, who will introduce themselves in just a moment. It's been so long since I've done one of these, I have to look down and remind myself what it is I'm supposed to say. This morning's session, as usual, is going to be a maximum of an hour. We might go under that, but I promise we will not go over that, even if I have to be rude. We are recording the session today for people who can't attend. It's a webinar format, obviously, so if you would like to submit questions at any time, and I'll be monitoring those, you can use the Q&A function would be best, and then you can upvote other questions that have appeared. If you want to use the chat, go ahead and do that also. And I think that's about it. I'm going to stop rambling because we have a bit of a presentation this morning, and I want to make sure that we have time to get through it and get to all the questions. So, Leah, Beth.
Great. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Leah Shai. I'm the associate principal here at the elementary school and looking forward to sharing with you, and super excited I'm going to actually introduce Beth a little bit because I don't know that all of our parents know her role at the school. She's an instructional coach, and this year she's also working into the 5th grade classrooms as an EAL support teacher for English language learners as well. And she's an expert in both of the areas. And we're so fortunate to have Beth as an instructional coach. What this role means is that she does a lot of work with teachers, with teams, helping now as we're looking at deep learning, helping us think about our pedagogical practices. What are the things we are doing as teachers, how we're planning units, how we're planning lessons, how we're thinking about student work, to make sure that we are doing what's best for students and that those things are in line with our school's mission. So Beth is going to be sharing with us a lot today, and we're all going to have the chance to learn from her.
Wow, thank you. That's what I do. Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. Rather than we're going to do a provocation as a way to provoke into the learning. So we're going to watch a little video in like 30 seconds or so. As you're watching the video, I want what questions are popping into your head about the video. It doesn't have to be about all the things. What questions about this chameleon are popping into your head? Type them in the chat. This is a strategy called the question flood. So Clive, I'm counting on you. I feel like you have lots of questions and curiosities, but I invite all parents to do so as well. All right, let's press play. Maybe you're a little shy, but hopefully lots of questions have popped into your head. I have a question of who keeps a chameleon as a pet. Clive had a question of it's not even looking at the glasses and yet it's still changing. I have questions about like what are the components of their skin that makes them do it? Like physiologically, how is that possible? I mean, I know I turn red sometimes, but that's about all. So many questions. And these curiosities is what sparks our students. And this leads us to our definition of learning.
Yeah, so I always get to share the definition of learning. And the part that I'm going to highlight today is about curiosity and motivation. And the engagement part. So learning is a personal, lifelong process that leads to change, including the ability and willingness to adapt. It is driven by curiosity and motivation, occurring in a supportive environment rich in engagement, social interaction, and feedback. Learning is constructed in authentic contexts and results in the development of new understandings and skills for all learners. So using this provocation, our curiosity and now our motivation to learn more about the chameleon was sparked. And we're engaged. We want to know more. One of the questions that I was wondering about is like, I also don't understand how it works, but it makes me wonder, at what point are biologists and scientists going to be able to know that enough to use that and kind of adapt that into other species? Like, technologically, how does this chameleon do this? And how can that be used in other contexts? Like that kind of blows my mind, because I'm just thinking a lot about how technology lately seems to be advancing so quickly. And here's the chameleon that can do something we can't yet. So I'm really interested. I'm curious. This is the kind of learning that we want our kids to be doing, not because the chameleon itself is the key thing, but this curiosity to be engaged and wanting to know answers to questions. This is part of our process of deep learning, is engaging students. When kids are engaged in the learning deeply, when they're motivated, they're curious, it's natural that the learning is going to be deeper. And deep learning is really more about asking the right questions. It's not just knowing the right answers. The devices through which we are looking right now have answers already to all of the known problems. So I don't need to have all of those answers in my head. It's far more important that I have the ability to ask the right questions for the things that aren't yet known, and then have the skills to kind of help figure out what those answers might be. How might we solve the problems of the world in the future, the things that aren't already known in the device that we're looking through. So we're really focused on the process, on authentic problem solving, on having students engage in transformational learning experiences, not just regular, we call them sometimes sit and get lessons, where you're just listening to the teacher saying something and memorizing it. We want students to have experiences that are really mindful of their own culture, identity, and ability. And these experiences also will foster creativity, adaptability, and iteration, things that we know our students need, not just for the future, but now in their lives. And this picture is from one of our professional learning sessions. When we have PAC days or PD days, these are really important times for our faculty to be able to learn together. And one of the things that our ES faculty has been doing this year is working with a consultant. His name is Trevor McKinsey. And I think we have one of his books up on the next slide. We'll just give a shout out here. And he's working with our team. So we started at the beginning of the year with some professional development he was giving for our entire faculty. And we're very fortunate that 3 times throughout the year, each team on its own has a chance to work directly with Trevor. In fact, 2nd grade team was just working with him. And he's really giving direct feedback about these processes that we're trying to do in our instruction so that we are more inquiry-based. Kath Murdoch, her book is the one on the left side, The Power of Inquiry. She's one of the big thinkers in inquiry worldwide, really. She's out of Australia and very, very well-known international school circles for helping teachers and teams develop this stance towards inquiry. So it's not just like one model of teaching. It's really about how we approach teaching and learning and putting the student at the center. And so this role of provocations as a tool for this is what we want to be looking at today. But it's just one part of kind of the whole toolbox of inquiry and helping our young students really become curious about the world around them, ask questions, and have the tools to find out their answers.
Okay, so a little word study for you. Okay, a little word inquiry, if you will. Provocation comes from the verb to provoke. Now, to provoke has different connotations. One connotation is to start a fight, but the other one is to provoke thinking, to get curious. All right, when we add the ION suffix on, it takes a verb and turns it into a noun. This is something I teach my multilingual students and really all our word curious students. So anytime you take a verb and add an ION, it turns it into a noun. So provocation is a thing that we do as teachers, that we design to provoke thinking. Why? So that we have questions, curiosity, wonder, and we inspire. There is no direct translation into Japanese. The original translation I found out was not a positive connotation, but what our Japanese team has used, hajime no ippo. Did I do that right, Leah? And to take the first step. So it is the launching point into a unit of inquiry. And we strategically design these launching points throughout the unit, but usually the provocation is the first thing, just like we started with our chameleon friend. Okay. Now, how do we nurture the curiosity of children? This is inherent in all children. Kath Murdoch shared a video from this artist. I'll let Leah take over.
Yeah, no problem. So this artist is Kelly O'Brien, and Kath Murdoch is the consultant that I previously mentioned who had this book about inquiry. In fact, she has multiple books about inquiry. A lot of our faculty has attended a workshop that she's done about nurturing inquiry stance and curiosity of kids. And this video is one that she used. And as a mother of a young child, this one really spoke to me, both in terms of the moments at bedtime when this flood of questioning kind of happens, but also just realizing getting inside a child's head. It's very different often than what we as adults think is important or what we think is interesting to us. And I think this artist speaks to that. So Clive, if you'll show the video, to think about children's questions and what they're wondering.
So I'm going to ask you some things that you've asked me, and then I just need you to repeat them. Okay?
Okay.
How does life live?
How does life live?
Can girls be robots?
Can girls be robots?
Say that again a bit louder.
Can girls be robots? Why is fire called fire? Why is winter? Why do we have to sleep? How many dogs are in this world? Where do ants come from? Why are some things special? Why do worms have faces? Why is sun in my eyes? Why is everybody not like pink, just black? What do princesses do? What do you want to be when you grow up? Do girls have vaginas? Why do boys cut their hair? How do you make water? Why do you like beautiful things so much? Why does you pick flowers and then they die? Are you old, Mom? Why are the leaves falling down? Will I have another birthday? Why doesn't everybody know me? What are you talking about? Such a conversation. Why do people laugh at me? Why is she mean? Why are you on your phone? What happens when I don't like you, Mom? What is mean and nice? What is kind? You love me? Why are kids small? Where did you find me when I was a baby? Why does the heart beat? Why do my feet sparkle? What's bacteria? Does it hurt you? How does food turn into poo? How do you be a mermaid, Mom? Why can't we see angels? Can you turn me into a fairy? Do blue butterflies eat parts of the sky? Do worms cry? Do bugs die? Why did the birds fly away? Why are we humans? Why do we eat animals? Why do trees just stand there? Why is it nighttime when people are awake? How does the earth move? What is atmosphere? Did God make the ocean? Where does the sun go? Why is the world so messy? Why do we all have cars? What is a molecule? What does extinct mean? What is power? What is history? Why are we gonna die? How do people get killed? What is fragile? When did the world even start? Mom, why are we starting again?
One more time.
What is history? How does life live?
Can't hear that. What?
How does life live?
Now, I find this video really beautiful because I think it honors the voice of children. When it's happening at bedtime, I don't feel its beauty so much. I'm going to be honest. Putting a kindergartner to bed, that seems to be when all these questions come flooding. But I love the way this video puts it together because I think it helps me reconnect to the fact that the world is this amazing, incredible place. And for our young children, it's so natural to have all of these questions about it. And rather than me just telling my daughter about the things that I think are important about what she sees, about what her world is, if I'm really listening to her questions, I'm able to help her continue to be a young person who grows up to question the world. And when we really think about pretty much any advancement of any society, it all started with a question, right? The solutions to our problems, the changes that we've made in our world, they all started with somebody having the audacity to question, to try to understand. And so some of these questions, one of the ones like that Clive was laughing, I saw, how does food turn into poo? Answering that might not solve the world, but if you don't understand that, you might not be able to solve certain kinds of cancer, right? So just this curiosity in our kids is so important. And this role of questioning is what Beth is going to continue to speak to us next.
I just want to empathize with trying to get your child to bed. I have a 4-year-old, and it had been a rough day on Tuesday, just, the stresses of modern life. And she's finally getting to sleep. She's fine. I think she's about to go to sleep. And she opens her eyes and she says, "Do penguins have noses?" Right? Like, this is just my nightly occurrence. Last night, she's just about to go to sleep and she asks a very specific question about childbirth. Okay, we're not ready for that one, at least at this moment. So children, their natural state is curious, and we can step back and remember that. It helps inform our next steps, right? Whether as parents or educators. Now, granted, they still have to go to bed. And if they're asking a question, right, as they're over the yellow line near the train track, we do need to intervene. But how do we maintain that curiosity? As educators, how do we ensure that school doesn't stifle that curiosity? So one thing I practice with other educators is, how do we respond to our children's questions? We step back, we pause, we listen, and we're curious about their thinking. We challenge assumptions as needed when misconceptions happen, and we wait and we pause. And so this is hard because as adults, we want to give them the answers, right? We want to show that we are competent and that we know stuff. And if we want to nurture that disposition of questioning and curiosity, most of the time, we don't want to give the answers. This is tricky. Actually, I do know that answer about childbirth. I was there, right? And yet, what do I want to nurture the curiosity and the connections? And if I step back and ask her questions, not at bedtime, on our walk to school, I wonder what's making you think about that. I actually get to understand them deeper. So when a student is asking a question like, how do you solve this math problem? Well, I wonder what we might choose, what strategy we might choose. Let's start there. Now we're putting the onus and the responsibility and the labor of learning and thinking on them. And that's what's going to really grow and nurture all those firing ideas and possibilities. So provocations are designed to lead to questions.
And now I want to just share a little bit about how does this link to deep learning, right? This is what we are focusing on as a school, making sure that our students, not just when they leave school, but throughout school, that they're continuing to develop these competencies of mindset, communication, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and global citizenship. And last week in the report card comments from your child's teacher, I'm sure you read some of these terms, because we're really starting to see how students are developing in these ways. So more important than explicit content knowledge is really how they're developing. And these competencies can be unlocked through provocations. So when we ask, or when we provide an opportunity for kids to ask questions, there's a huge range of possibilities of where their interest might go, of what might motivate them. And this unlocks these competencies. The creativity of asking the right questions, the critical thinking of starting to make connections across different areas, even being able to kind of communicate what their questions are, the mindset about being a self-directed learner and trying to find the answers and having the perseverance to stick with it when they're not sure and they have to keep trying. All of these different competencies from our Portrait of a Learner, they're unlocked through these provocations that invite the child into their own learning journey. It's really following what their interest is and what they're inspired by. So it's a very key part of helping even our youngest kids work towards these 6 areas in deep learning.
So if deep learning is the goal, what's the instructional shift? How do we live our value of deep learning as a school in our day-to-day practice? What we're seeing is from a teacher-directed to teacher-framed, student-led. that is the shift. Leah, can you tell us a little more?
Sure, yeah. So when we think about teacher directed, we often think of some of the more traditional forms of school, probably the kind of form that most of us experienced as students, where the teacher is determining, and maybe not solo, it maybe as part of an educational team, but the teacher is deciding what the student is going to learn. The teacher is deciding how the student will learn that. The teacher is determining what the assignments will be, what the reading will be, what the next step, all of those pieces are controlled and directed by the teacher. That works for some kids, but it's not around the student, it's around the teacher. And really the student is the person who's at the center of the learning. So teacher framed student led means the teacher still knows what are the big picture ideas, what is the core content, or what skills in this discipline are really critical for the student to learn. But then beyond that, how am I using the student at the center of their learning to think about, like, how can I nudge in and frame their learning so they're still getting the content, they're still developing the skills that I know are important, but at the same time, as a learner, it's grounded in that own student's authenticity. It's about their real interest. It's true problems. It's developing their grit, because when it gets tough, it's not just the student saying, or the teacher saying, oh, here's the next lesson, here's the next lesson. The student themselves has to kind of push through and figure out what are the next steps in my learning. When the student is leading it and the teacher is framing it, that curiosity can be included in the unit. I'll give you an example. Our Japanese teachers might be doing some learning around a Japanese holiday, and they can just tell them the information. Or they can say, we want our kids to all understand more about this cultural holiday. I'm going to start with their questions. And so from my window, I see this every year. Our doll display, the Hinamatsuri, is coming up, and they'll set up the dolls, and the kids come out and they start to look and notice, and it's their wondering. So it's led by the students questioning, but the teacher knows what learning they want to make sure to nudge into. So it's not just saying whatever the students want to learn, that's it. The teacher is really framing it. The teacher has set up that opportunity for them to come look at the Hina dolls, and the teacher is helping the students kind of come up with their own questions and their curiosity, and then we'll use those to frame the learning. It makes the learning more rigorous. It's just more real. There's opportunities to go much, much deeper. Instead of the teacher just giving the amount that they think is the right amount, it's really following what the students are ready for. So this is the instructional shift that we as a school are making. That's not just in the elementary school, that's across all 4 of our divisions. We're sharing with you today a lot of the ways that as our elementary school, we're really leaning into this shift through an inquiry approach.
So let me tell you a story, 2 stories about what this actually looks like in 2 grade levels, from the students. So how can provocations drive the learning? You're about to see a video designed by Hardy Fickart, our design teacher here in the ES. It was for tuning in purposes. So the kids were asking questions, naming and noticing things they see in the video. Now, I know that was a longer time to be quiet on a webinar than typically expected. That's from our rice paddy here on campus. Our kids play by the rice paddy all the time because it's right near the playground and the field, right? Yet this video zooms in on very strategic elements of the rice paddy. If we could go to the next slide. Because here's the curriculum. The curricular unit is around systems and interdependence, two scientific concepts, and going through a science inquiry cycle. So even though our kids play by the rice paddy all the time, we zoomed in to see things that showed systems and interdependence. After the kids kind of practiced that skill of noticing, writing, sketching, asking questions in their science notebooks, then they had a real prepared reason to go into the actual rice paddy, right? We could have started with the rice paddy for sure, but we've tuned in with this provocation that led to a second provocation of going in live. But we've already started zooming in on some strategic elements that get to this idea of systems and interdependence. Here's the story of how that unit went, and an oversimplified story for the sake of one slide. From there, their questions, they wrote so many questions, and then they realized they needed to understand more about ecosystems, about rice paddy, about what composers and decomposers and consumers, these scientific factual things, in order to understand what's happening in our own rice paddy. From there, they had questions about how to yield more rice. So from there, in collaboration, here's our portrait of a learner, teams with similar questions designed science experiments with variables that might yield more rice. From there, the kids collected data, learned about data, relearned about that ruler and how we grow and how we measure the height of our rice, right? We grouped them into three. There were three themes that were testable questions. Some had different numbers of fish in tanks, right, to see what yielded more rice. Some had organic pesticide to see if there was a pest to see if we decreased pest, if it would yield more rice. And one created solar panels to get more sun. So these were the different groups that had come up. These were completely student driven from questions, and then through coaching from their teachers and from the design teacher helped them narrow into testable questions. From there, we yielded a lot of rice, okay? And they took action, right? So that rice was donated to Second Harvest. And then maybe you saw our 5th grade students at Winterfest sharing about their work, sharing about Second Harvest, and inviting you to partner with them. So that's the arc of the learning that started from a provocation. We knew as educators that we had to teach collaboration. That's part of our portrait of a learner. We had to teach the scientific inquiry process and designing an experiment, and we had to teach around systems and interdependence. The rest really was fueled by interest and questions that were provoked from our provocation. Okay, so we just designed this. So this is a launch party, okay, for this next provocation. We designed this in partnership with our consultant, Trevor McKinsey, with 1st grade. So they've done a unit around structure and functions of different animals. Okay, and so here's a provocation they've designed. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? And we don't have to watch the whole turtle, but let's watch a little bit of our turtle friend.
Okay, you tell me when to stop.
Sure. Okay, what do you see? I'm going to narrate. I'm going to do a think aloud. I see a turtle shell, but I don't see a turtle face. What's going on here? Huh. I'm wondering as well. All right. Oh, he's moving, so we know he's not dead. Okay, that's what I think. All right. Why is he in his shell right now? What is around him? Why is he in his shell? Oh, there he is. What is making him think he can come out of his shell. How does he get his body in that shell? What like part of his skeleton is happening? Okay, so I see him poking out his head. We can stop our turtle friend. Okay. Right? Like it's engaging. Like even us as adults, I'm the one that put that video on the slide and I'm still curious and excited by watching it. Okay, but the provocation doesn't end there. As a question, because it's teacher framed and these are our younger learners, how are these artifacts connected? And I think if we were in the classroom, we'd also have a physical shell for them to hold. I think that is one of the goals as well. So we'd have a helmet, a child's helmet, a physical shell, and then this video available for the kids to watch. And so now we ask the kids, maybe on chart paper in small groups, how are these artifacts connected? And they start talking and writing and drawing and scribing. So that's the provocation we've planned, one of the provocations we've planned in first grade. Next slide, please. So where might this go? Again, we've done this unit on structure and function for many years, but we want to really lean into the curiosity. So we are iterating this unit, we are innovating this unit to be launched with provocation. So it's the kids driving the learning, not us dragging the kids to the finish line. So they're going to have, this is a transdisciplinary unit, so it will be science, design, reading, and writing. They have to find out about all these structures and functions of different animals. They have to sort that. We're going to go to the Tama Zoo. They're going to go and observe. We're going to take pictures and come back and analyze the trunk on the elephant, right? And so we're going to go deeper. A lot of the structures and functions of animals are for 3 reasons: for protection, for food, and for finding a mate. So we're going to read about these different animals. Why do birds have colorful feathers? Why do they do dances? So we are asking questions. There's that critical thinking. We're not going to stop there. And this is one of the strengths of the unit that we're maintaining even in this like change. How do these, through biomimicry, how are man or person-made constructs and inventions inspired by nature? And so we're going to interview our pals and see what problems they have and what could we design for them? What invention could we design for them to help their problem inspired by the structures and functions and the creature features we see in our natural world. So it's creative, it's playful, it's rigorous because there's going to be a lot of nonfiction reading and writing and looking at themes of animals, but it starts with a turtle.
So thanks, Beth. That wonderful. I'm glad we recorded this because I love being able to share this out, not just with our own parents, but other people too. There were a bunch of questions that were pre-submitted for people who are on the call right now. If you have questions that you would like to submit, maybe you want to wait and see what we're answering here, but go ahead and use the Q&A function if you'd like, and use the, it's not anonymous by the way, and use the upvote function if you'd like. So should I move into the questions now, you guys?
Well, I was going to say, if anybody has any questions specifically kind of about this provocations and inquiry and deep learning, would be happy to address those first, because the pre-submitted questions, of course, they weren't submitted after watching this. So they're all more about operations and school things. So I'll give a minute for people to share if they have questions specifically on this topic. And while doing that, I just want to also kind of make the connection for parents. Right? So we shared a lot about what this looks like in school. What might this look like at home? We all experience the bedtime flood of questions, which for some is stalling. For some, it's the first time that the child has like had your undivided attention all night. And so that's when it happens. You know, there are all different reasons that occurs. But when else like might we do something like provocations? Is this even something as parents that we should be thinking about? And I think there's, for me as a parent, and I'm speaking as a parent now, not as an administrator, I think there are 2 things that it makes me reflect on. One is, when is my child already naturally questioning the world around them, and how do I respond to that? Do I respond in ways that are about providing answers and moving on with our time and being efficient? Or do I respond in ways that honor that curiosity? whether we get the answers or not is less important, but just honoring that curiosity, having conversations, keeping my child motivated in the learning. That's what I try to do. I'm not going to pretend for a second that I always have the stamina and the energy to do that every single time I get a question, but I'm leaning that way. And with my kindergartner, there's still tons and tons of questions. I'm also at the end where I've got now an 11-year-old boy. Questions aren't as much now. And, I'm starting to realize I've got this window. It's not always going to be here. This is the time with my daughter to really try to continue to nurture that questioning time. And my son's just his stage, he's not engaging in that in the same way. So it does help me try, I say, to engage in those with my daughter. But the other thing in terms of provocations is just thinking about what we do as a family. I don't need to set up these lovely videos about a rice field at all. That's not something as a parent. But do we go to the zoo? When we go to the zoo, do I go over and read the card and just tell them the information that's there? Do we just walk around and not have any conversation? Or do we pause at the monkey cage and I model and say like, wow, that's really interesting. Look, I see that monkey. It looks like he's trying to throw the ball, but that's not really what's happening. What do you notice? And kind of engage in the curiosity and the conversations and let that be the provocation. If we might be running errands around town, but I might notice something with my son now where it might be a kanji on a train sign that I know he's been learning in school, and I might point it out and be like, oh, I wonder what that is. I know it means standing, but in this context, what could that be? And just kind of try to look for the places in our natural world around us to ask and honor the questions that they have and maybe spark some more questions. So as a parent, it looks very different. You're not going to set up lessons the way we described here, but the same concept of nurturing that curiosity, I think, is in the world around us all the time. I think we can move on. No one has submitted any new ones. I kind of chatted over that, but nothing has been sent in the chat. So why don't we go ahead, Clive, to the—
Yeah, I wanted to make one comment that semantics are important. And what I've started to hear over the years, because there's been talk about student-led learning for a number of years. And it's quite simple for people who are on the periphery, aren't teachers, to say, well, what does that mean? What the kids just go in and do whatever they want. And so even simply adding the words of teacher framed and student led, it helps for people to get a better idea of what we're talking about, what is happening in those classes, that there are things that need to be learned, but how do we go about engaging the students in a better way than what did you say? Sit and get. I had to write that down. I hadn't heard that before.
I heard that one.
Okay. All right.
That idea that teacher framed student led, I know, is kind of one of the mantras of middle school right now as well. Like that's a big thing this year that they're leaning into. So it's really not just elementary school. This is an ASIJ move. Okay, so one of the questions that was pre-submitted, and I, as I stated before, most of these are kind of operational. So to be honest, many of the questions that were submitted are not ones that sit within elementary school, but we're really happy to share with you what we can. So one was, can you please give an overview of what is happening on the planned renovation or redevelopment of buildings at ASIJ? You may have attended one of our earlier sessions in the year with the Ennead architects, and they came to campus. They're actually coming again, I believe it's later this month, to gather some more information, some more feedback for another round of this process. And we're happy to say that in April, when we have our State of the School event, which will be held downtown at Tokyo American Club, the architects will be there to be able to share at that point kind of the next step, what some of their suggestions are, and to get some, I think it's also another opportunity to get feedback. It's a continual process as we go through this renovation and redevelopment planning, but April is a time that you can expect to receive some more communication with a little bit more details in terms of the planning and next steps.
Yeah, not that I know a lot more than you do at this point, but one of the things, just to frame it for people, is what I have noticed the architects are doing is giving an idea of what an entirely redesigned campus might look like, taking into account things such as we're not only in Chofu, but we're in Fuchu, and so and Mitaka to a certain extent. And so there are certain parts of the campus where the height restrictions are basically 45 meters. And then if you look at Fuchu, that's much, much less. And so what could we do? And my understanding as they come back later this month is to now engage people further about what the inside of these buildings might look like for the future of education. So I'm not sure if that gives a little bit more, but as you said, in April, State of the School will have a much more defined update.
Question about the bus. Is there a plan for no iPad use on the bus? So for all bus matters, Greg Krauth is our Director of Transportation Services. So I checked with him because he's the one who would make this decision and communicate about it. And he said, at this point, there is no plan to prevent or stop iPad use on the bus. We know that there are different families have different interests in having their kids on iPads on the bus. For some kids, it's a good way for them to have downtime. They listen to audiobooks. It can be a long ride. For others, it's something that they might even do their homework on while they're on the bus. It just depends. Some kids we know play games on their iPads. And so there's mixed family interests in having this. At this point, we are allowing it, but that's a conversation you can have with your child if that's something that you would prefer for them not to use. That's a sort of a family decision, family time. It is possible if your child is bringing their iPad to and from school to put a time limit on it so that it's not being used between, say, 3 and 5 o'clock. In general, putting time limits on devices is not always the best way to help kids understand responsible use, but it may be something depending on your child and your family's values that you might want to consider doing while iPads in general are allowed on the buses. Next question also about buses. Will students be able to take different returning buses after COVID becomes downgraded to the flu in Japan? So there's been a lot of talk about Japan's timing in downgrading COVID, what that means across lots of different systems. As far as for the buses, pre-COVID, there were more opportunities for students to ride different buses at the end of the day. And Greg is working on a system. It's not yet in place, but that will be communicated to all parents once we're ready to kind of go live with that, where 3rd through 5th graders would be able to take a different bus home at the regular bus time. So because of the after school schedule and limits in after school clubs and activities, a lot of that is based on our bus capacity. So all of our buses have to take kids home at 3 o'clock. Only a certain number of them are able to return in time based on traffic and conditions and location and whatnot to be able to take kids home after school activities. So we don't have the entire fleet available at 5 o'clock. And because there are limited spaces, it's much more difficult to change those late bus assignments. However, for grades 3 to 5, there will be a system that's being developed now where students will need to sign up. Parents will have to sign the students up in advance in order to take a different bus home. So let's say at 3 o'clock dismissal, if your child was going to go have a play date with another family, you'd be able to log that in the system a day ahead, and we'd know, and then the child could ride the different 3 o'clock bus home. So that's something for 3rd through 5th graders. It is for the older kids that are a little bit more responsible with their afternoon schedules and whatnot. And we'll be communicating once that system is in place. It may or may not be directly tied to COVID being downgraded as we kind of are playing out that system timing.
Love to hear the answer to this one.
Yeah. Do you want to ask it?
When can we get rid of our masks?
Yeah, so there were two different, these two questions are both about mask use. So the school's decisions about the masks are really a board decision, and the board is having those conversations. Again, if you're reading the news, you're knowing that in Japan, these conversations are happening now. There's conversation about the mask guidelines being lowered around the time that Japanese schools are having their graduation ceremonies in March and the kind of the special beginning of the year time in April. And so that's something that is being monitored and kind of followed to see. The school's trying to balance the different interests of the community, but also really the MEX guidelines, so the education systems guidelines here in Japan. What are they saying? And right now they are still recommending the masks for all first graders and up. So right now our kindergartners are not required to wear face masks. Some of them choose to, some of them don't. That's based on the MEX guidelines that local Yochi or Hoikuin children do not need to wear masks. We're following that, and recommendations will be made by the board. And we do anticipate this happening this school year, but it's difficult to say for sure right now when that will happen. I will say this has been communicated earlier. Jim Harden shared in one of our Mustang bulletins back in the fall term that there are opportunities in particular times where teachers may put their mask down. So we're seeing this particularly for the younger students when they're doing phonics, for example. It's really important for the students to be able to see the way sounds are formed and also even to be able to show the way they're making sounds. So at certain times, for short periods of time, the teacher may lower their mask, and students who are feeling comfortable to do it may also be invited to lower their mask for short periods of time when inside. Outside, masks are optional. We do have our students still have their mask with them, otherwise they would lose them and it would be very difficult to follow. But when they're outside, many of our students at recess are not wearing their mask, and that's perfectly fine. And inside the classroom, you will occasionally, for instructional purposes, see both adults and students being invited to, but not required to, lower their mask when comfortable for certain times. And we do, yes, Clive, we do hope that we'll have looser guidelines on this as the conditions continue to improve during this COVID time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hope to get rid of it soon. I have to say, when I take my mask off at school outside, I almost feel like I'm walking around without my trousers on. It's been so long since I've been wearing this thing. But what's also interesting is just in general, because I live near Kichijoji, so in Okashira Park, that the guidelines have been out for a long time by the Japanese government if you don't have to wear your mask outside. And yet I would say 80%, 90% of the people are still wearing their mask outside. So even when the directive is you don't have to do this anymore, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I will be leading the charge, and I know others will too. And
I'll be honest, Clive, I'm really curious when that happens, how many of our students will choose to continue to wear them versus take them off. Yeah. I was at a social thing with my family, and my son was with his really close friend the same age, and there weren't a ton of people. It wasn't a super crowded place. It was, just a couple of families, but it was inside, and the adults had taken their masks off to eat. And my son and his friend, they kept their masks on the whole time. They were just accustomed to it. They were comfortable with it. That's what they chose. I was surprised. So it is very interesting to see how different people respond and how they feel comfortable, and kind of how this will unfold. But we are hoping to soften the policy as the conditions support that decision.
Yep.
So this is a tricky one. This question that was submitted, I saw in the news that organofluorine compounds, PFAS, have been detected in soil in the Tama area. Question, was there any testing done on the water used in the cafeteria and water servers? Please share any information you have regarding safety. Thanks. Thank you for this question. Yeah, I think it was about a week ago that this came out in the news that there were some of these compounds detected, and scientists are still trying to figure out what that actually might mean for health. Is there what are the limits, and what does that mean in bodies and whatnot? And our facilities manager has contacted an outside partner, an external partner, who is going to be doing water testing here on campus. So we'll have a better idea of whether this is something that has impacted our campus in any way or not. And then based on those findings, whether there are recommendations, kind of what next steps might be, depending on what that could be like. So when we have information on that, that would be shared. But we did want to let you know that we are working with an external partner to have the water tested.
Do you have any timeline on that, Leah, or no?
I don't. I'm sorry, I don't know specifics on that.
Okay, but we'll let people know when we know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as I said, we won't. Sometimes we go under, won't go over, but we are almost at our full hour. So if there are no further questions, and I'm talking slowly in case somebody's typing into the Q&A thing. Thank you very much for your guys' time. Do we have another one scheduled for later in the year? I assume we do.
I'm sorry, I don't know the date offhand. There is one scheduled for March, and then we have the State of the School event in April, which will be live. So we really want to encourage everyone to come. Our March Mustang Connection is going to be in this format, but then we hope to be able to have more of these in person going forward beyond that. So definitely in April, we look forward to seeing many of you at Tokyo American Club for that event.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's a little bit early, but I'll wish you a nice holiday towards the end of next week. And again, thanks for joining us, and see you around, I hope.
Thank you all.